plan, you can have a great tactics, but you have to have the right players on the field. And I'm just wondering, are you confident? Because we've seen CEOs come and go, we've seen ministers come and go. Do you have the right players on the field now with the right skills to get the job done?
Yes, we do. We do. As I have been talking about this issue of energy, I think if we look at it narrowly, then we can think we have a crisis, as people say. I think we have a challenge, not a crisis. Because if you look at energy, energy has a history in this country. It has never been enough. It was believed to be because the powers that be at the time said we have enough. I think if you look at it, there's a real usage rolling out of energy. Firstly, to grow the economy. Now, if energy was not enough for the country and we are growing the economy, it means it's a serious challenge to energy itself. And if you want to give energy as a constitutional right to all citizens throughout the country, no matter how remote the area they are, and we have millions, like we have, for an example, rolled out energy, the electricity, to people about 11 million. And we still have millions that are remaining. So the demand has gone, it just rocketed after 1994, and therefore undermined the capacity that we had. And that's what we are dealing with. We might have problems in the process of that relating to people who are working. For an example, I can understand as a president why you should have power stations that are not serviced at the same time, having problems. And that I'm going to go into to find out exactly. Because even if you have a shortage, but how are you managing the resources that you have? Now, you can't have one power station collapsing after the other because it's not serviced. Where were the people who are working there? What were they doing? Now, that's a matter I'm going to go into at our time in government, because that in itself indicates either the skills that you're talking about or somebody's just negligent. Because you'd be saying we are using this to our capacity, and of course we have a challenge. So the combination of factors. But as the minister said, as we've been saying, we have a plan to deal with the matter. And it's a good plan, great plan, and we are financing it. So it's not like we don't know what to do when we can say we have a crisis. Now we have a challenge and we've got a solution. We are dealing with it. There is a war room, for an example, in ESCOM, and we have asked the deputy president to oversee this process, to ensure that nothing falls in between the cracks. So we have I think in any situation, if you have a solution and you have got all the ingredients that are needed to it, you have solved the problem, almost. It's when you don't know what to do where you have a problem, when also you don't know why we have the problem and how we are going to resolve the problem. We talk about energy mix, where we are dealing with all types of energies, putting it together to move forward, including the involvement of the private sector, so that independent producers are going to help to contribute to the national grid, so that we are able to solve the question of energy to the whole country.
All right, so okay, what I'd like to do now is to go to the floor and get the questions of some of the people in the room. I'm going to ask three people to stand up, one after the other, and then we'll get those questions answered. We'll start with Wynand Gous, table 38. Wynand Gous, table number 38.
Hi, good morning, President. Question really is about the long term, the 5-10-year vision. Your vision for the country, economic, social and political, 5 to 10 years from now. Thank you.
Okay, I'm writing the questions down so
Oh,
you don't have to remember.
You will help me.
Okay, table number 5, Tsepo Ramantisi. Okay, table number 5 is our next question. And don't forget, viewers at home, you can be part of this conversation as well. Hashtag TNA BizBrief at Morning Live SABC.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is around the recent spate of attacks on foreign shops in the townships. Is the country prepared for the resurgence of this, and are we ready to arrest it over the next couple of months if such situations do arise again?
Okay, thank you very much. And I think not too far from you is JC Crano. JC Crano, table 5.
Mr. President, last night you announced that property ownership for foreign investors, no more. I think that's rather a shocking statement. Is it possible to still influence those investors that would have come and that's now going to go somewhere else to stay? Because you must have a rationale why legislation is going to go through stopping property ownership. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for your questions. So, Mr. President, the first one, your vision for South Africa, what's it going to look like in 5 years, in 10 years' time, particularly from an economic, social, and political point of view?
Well, my view is that 5 years, 10 years, 10 years in particular, I think South Africa is going to look very good. I think we are in a country that is very vibrant. We are in a country that has big economy, because at times when we talk about South Africa, we forget that South Africa is a big economy. We have a country that has developed. We have a country that has a plan, which is a national plan. We know exactly what we are doing. The government, all departments are aligning to that plan. We have a country that is investing in the infrastructure, which is absolutely important, because infrastructure influences the growth of the economy. So we are very clear. And particularly, if we do inter-trade with Africa, Africa itself as a continent is working on a huge infrastructure development. You can't go wrong if you tackle those fundamental issues. But also, if you grow the capacity of energy, which is part of an element that you need to grow the economy, you can then say, indeed, and it's not as if we are just talking. In the infrastructure itself, we are not just talking billions, we are talking trillions that you are putting in. So there is capacity, there are resources, and we are moving on that way. In 10 years' time, I think South Africa will be a wonderful country to be, particularly because you have, much as from time to time as a natural thing between labor and the private sector, there will always be clashes. They are historical, because they will never agree on everything totally. And government talking about the priorities of the country, and therefore coming to some framework agreement, I think that is a good sign to say South Africa economically is moving forward. And we are being recognized, by the way, by international institutions that we are doing very well. We were at Davos recently. That is what comes out. And the interest of investors who come to South Africa is very great. And they have been coming. At times we make a mistake to talk as if about direct foreign investment, as if there is no investment happening. It is actually happening. It's just that we South Africans, we love exaggerating things. You know, if you hear, we want foreign direct investors to come, it's as if they are not here. They are here in big numbers, big monies. So we will be very far in 10 years' time. The second question was
The second question was talking
The looting.
about the foreign shop owners.
Yes.
Are we prepared to deal with that going forward? And I have to say, what breaks my heart often when I see these kinds of stories is that it's Africans on Africans. And I just wonder, how do we change that mindset and get a healing on the continent? Because we should be united as a continent, shouldn't we, going forward? But there are these tensions. Are we prepared for further outbreaks, and how do we change that mindset?
Well, I think we are in the process of doing so. We've been working on it. I think Africa is very clear that we are one continent, and that's why the leadership in the continent are emphasizing the intertrade, the opening of borders. That's a discussion, by the way. And we ourselves are going to be in any other country, like others will be in any other country. I think there's one thing we should recognize as South Africans. That's precisely because we're a bigger economy. That attracts people to come where opportunities are more than where they are. Is a natural thing. I'm sure in the number of years ago, you must have heard in Europe, from time to time, they get confronted by this issue, wherein the citizens begin to have irritation about the foreigners. It's not just an African thing. It does happen. It's a question of how the country itself handles that. It's very important. And I think it's important for us to understand this, because if we want our economy to grow, we want to have trade with the continent, we can't have an attitude which is negative towards people who are coming from the same continent. We've got to say, how do you deal with this? How even the government helps to deal with this issue. Now, it's going to be very difficult to say in a continent which is quite dire in terms of in other countries where opportunities are not there. People try to move to where opportunities. The business of people from other countries coming to South Africa is not a new thing. Even during the West times, people were here. It's a question of how to handle it in a democratic country. I think we need to do more to educate ourselves that we are one people in the continent. We're just divided by colonialism, and that the resources that we have, we should share. But it's important also that foreigners themselves, when they come in, they do business. There should be that recognition. If you take the last incident in Soweto, now perhaps you could go to the small details that some people were trying to steal, right? Now, if people are trying to steal and you see that, call the police so that the police come and handle those who are doing the wrong things. You don't take the law into your own hands. Now, if among the foreigners, you then should take the law into your hands, you should. And the gun is unlicensed, illegal gun. And the report I got is that of about 12 people or so who were arrested with illegal firearms, 10 of them were foreigners. Now that is a problem, because I don't think we should look at this from one side. How both sides handle one another. The fact that these businesses were in Soweto for a long time, thriving, and nobody was saying, we don't want the foreigners here, which is the attitude of the South Africans. Nobody was saying, we don't want you in these shops. Only when this incident happens, then it triggered that problem. So it's a question of how the foreigners understand, because you can even see as that incident was happening, many of the South Africans who live in those areas will say, we are living very peacefully with these people, with our friends, and all. So I think at times it is an exaggeration. Also failing to say, what is it that caused the problem? Well, that's what we must deal with. It means we as South Africans, perhaps in the authority as well, we need to help the foreigners. One, so that they must understand they couldn't provoke. Two, they themselves should have things within the law. If they apply for the gun, you apply for the gun, you get it. Now, because once you tell people, through you guys, the media, that these guys are carrying illegal firearms. You are saying to the South Africans, we are dealing with people who are not very straight, and therefore you begin to have an attitude. You begin to ask an unnecessary question. Why are they here? Why are they having shops? I think that is what we need to look at. But at the authority level, leadership, whatever level, we need to say, we are all Africans, we need to stay together, and the South Africans are not having an attitude. Otherwise, we wouldn't have so many foreigners in this country. Just incidents happen here and there, and we've got to deal with it as an incident that has happened at that time. I don't think we should exaggerate, because South Africans, as you know them, if they'd taken an attitude, the situation would be worse. I think they understand, but also when the police come, they're able to deal with that kind of situation. So it's a matter that needs our political understanding, tolerance, continuously talking to one another. We are one people. And you know, the foreigners in South Africa, it's the biggest number in the continent, South Africa, that is carrying. And if that was a serious issue, we'd be having problems every day. And you go to any part of this country, whether in Cape Town, whether in Port Elizabeth, whether in Durban, they are there and there is no problem. I think we should not exaggerate. Let us deal with the issues as they appear so that we don't influence people wrongly. Okay. It is just important for us to do so.
All right, and then the third question was around property ownership, and I guess the caps also on land ownership domestically. I think the question was more about the rationale and the fear that he has that this might scare off investors. Even though, as you said, I think we had something like 88 billion rand of direct investment inflows in 2013. So your thoughts on property ownership caps?
The issue that we dealt with very specifically is the land, perhaps as property. That's what we dealt with. We are moving to take a decision that foreigners will be allowed to lease and do business. And the lease could be as long as you want. What we are saying, the buying and owning it, that's what we are looking at. You must take the history of this country, that the majority of the population here don't have the land, right? And the land that is being bought and owned by people who don't live in this country, in a sense, further exacerbate that problem. And people have been saying, we don't have land. Instead of taking land and sharing it with us, we are selling it. Why do you do so? And the best parts of the country have been bought to a large extent by foreigners, so that South Africans are saying we can own the best part of the land, and they're owned by foreigners. Why is that? I think any investor who's coming to South Africa, not as a settler, but as a business person, the law allows lease. You can lease it for a long time and do a business. So I think it's a question of those who work in this area to get used to it. There are very few countries who sell land. That's a very important asset for a nation. And we think we have a responsibility to ensure that we handle it with greatest care for the benefit of the citizens. But those who come to do business is one thing. If you want to buy land, then you can come to settle and become a citizen. You will be able to buy it.
Okay, all right. Well, on that note then, we'll take another quick break, and we'll catch up with Andy on the other side and also start taking a look at your tweets as well. Stay with us. We're talking to President Jacob Zuma. All right, so if I could have your attention, please. Thank you very much indeed. The audience is watching from across the country and also across borders. And I'd just like now to go to Ayanda, who's standing by with another guest. Ayanda?
Thank you so much, Peter. Yes, Leanne, raising some very key points there, and I'm sure as you're jotting down notes to speak to President Jacob Zuma about them, let's continue to unpack the nitty-gritty of the State of the Nation address. Something else that the President alluded to during that address about agriculture and how it's a catalyst not only for growth but also for food security. Now, here's something he spoke about, which was quite interesting, Peter, that there's a public-private partnership in the form of the Agricultural Policy Action Plan. All right, it's projected to bring 1 million hectares of underutilized land into full production in 3 years. Now, we want to find out how, and to do just that, I'm joined by the Deputy Minister in the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, Mr. Begigele. A very good morning to you. I almost didn't recognize you without your signature hat. How are you?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm very well, thank you. Let's talk about the how now. How is this action plan going to work?
Well, starting from here, I'm sure everybody is enjoying the products of agriculture, the food on the table. Specifically on the question, the APEP is the methodology of substituting the importation with our own productions in South Africa. Agriculture working together with the rural development, providing that kind of land, both the state and the land that has been returned to the people, and agriculture following to make sure that that land is not lying fallow, but we are working out of it. But the bigger portion of that should be the new entries so that it also creates jobs, especially the young people. They must be allowed, provide the resources and make sure that that kind of land does not lie fallow. The President also announced yesterday that 2 billion has been already put on that land and other ways of dealing with the land. That is from one department at the present moment. Other departments will be putting money. But the major thing is to make sure that we produce food. There are new entries, especially young people from the universities and colleges, and that is processed here in South Africa to create more and more jobs.
Agri-parks, that's something else that President Jacob Zuma discussed in the State of the Nation address. Tell us a little bit about that and how you plan on measuring success. How will we know that that 2 billion rand that you spoke about has borne fruit?
Agri-parks will be 27 that will be established come the present financial year, and agri-parks will be worked between agriculture and the rural development. Other departments are invited. We'll be working with the special sister departments like water and the Department of Trade to make sure that the South Africans that are coming in agriculture, they get other two things. They process, but also they get the new market, because it's no use producing the food and then you don't have the market to do that. But it should be after the satisfaction, making sure that people have enough food to eat, then they can sell. Hence, we'll be working much with the smallholder farmers so that people, they can have food to eat before they sell.
All right, now, lastly, as briefly as possible, I never thought in my wildest dreams that I'd hear President Jacob Zuma mention apples in the State of the Nation address, but he did, saying that, the agro-processing and the export of apples and other products into the likes of China. I want to take you back now to the citrus fruit and the blemishes therein and how some parts of the UK were frowning upon that. That's all been resolved. But the state of our exports of what we produce in South Africa, what is it looking like at the moment?
Well, half resolved, because that matter is still on the table. We're trying to work on it, but the future does look better than once when they were about to cut us off. The minister led the serious delegation that with the Director General from the department to make sure that that doesn't happen. The citrus fruit that South Africa sends, especially in the EU region, is the best. They can't afford to lose that themselves, though we know that beyond the so-called black spot, there are other politics that we can't discuss at the present moment here, but the future does look bright on that one. I think we are winning that war.
We'll have to leave it there and perhaps make some time to discuss that, which we cannot discuss today. But thank you so much for that update. Peter, a lot to get through. I know there's some questions on the floor. There's some tweets as well. What do you have for us?
Ayanda, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's get back to President Zuma. We've got a few tweets that have come through, and one is around security, around crime, and also, I guess, at the same time, we're living in a continent where terrorism is on the rise. We saw Kenya enter Somalia. and the consequences were, it came back home. And I just wonder your thoughts going forward. As a continent, we have this challenge, ISIS, Boko Haram, these groups that are wanting to create problems. Is there a fear this could come to South Africa? And also domestically, people need more reassurance around crime and social security.
Well, as you know, terrorism goes to any part of the world. Even the biggest countries experienced the attacks. It's a question of how the globe, in the first instance, coordinate the efforts towards fighting it. If you leave the globe, the continent of Africa also should have its own. This matter has been discussed in the AU. We have, for an example, agreed that instead of relying on the help, we need to have countries that voluntarily, whilst we're discussing how to secure the continent, that these countries should come together and form a quick reaction force, that if there was a problem anywhere in the continent, there is a continental kind of force under the AU that could move immediately, because the strength of countries is not the same. Some countries are weak, some countries could be strong. But the fact of the matter is that once they get into the continent, they will spread out. So it's better to stop it. It's better to make countries be viable. If you make an example of Kenya, for an example, Somalia, as you know, it used to be a very quiet and stable country, but it was taken over by the terrorists for a long time. And countries in the same region who got affected by this, because then refugees come, this kind of people come, they had to take an action. IGAD, as a regional grouping, took actions. But as they were trying to deal with this, it was manifesting itself in many ways. That's why a country like Kenya, because they began attacking Kenya because they would be out there hiding there. So Kenya took a decision to move, and of course the consequence that they hit back. That's what happened in this kind of situation. One side, you either say, I do nothing about them, and then they make your country a playing ground or a launching pad, or you will still suffer if they want to do something. They could be chasing one another. So it's important for countries, as countries, to do that, but also as a country. South Africa, as you know, even in Kenya, when people were investigating, one of the people who was either coordinating the bombing or was part of it had, in a sense, used South Africa to pass through and go there. So we either take a decision. We want to be used as a launching pad or as an area where people sit and plan and go and do harm in other places, or we move. I think our security cluster are on top of the thing in terms of the information to know what is happening, even if people are not acting here. And I think we are fairly ready to deal with any other situation that could come. And I doubt that people could come and try to attack us in the manner in which it is happening in other countries. So I think we should still feel fine as a country. We are dealing with the security. We are aware of some of the things that other people are not aware of, and we are definitely strengthening our security. We are coordinating with other countries how to fight terrorism, even beyond Africa. So I think we should be content that for now, there is nothing that will go wrong.
What about crime at home? We're seeing malls now being scenes of carnage at times. These guys seem to become more brazen and braver in committing these crimes, and people are just not safe shopping. How can you reassure South Africans going forward that crime isn't going to escalate out of control?
No, I think as you must have seen, the statistics always indicate whether that kind of crime is rising or going down. And I think the statistics have shown at some point that even the attacks on the malls was not necessarily going up. I think these are matters that we've got to be dealing with in a country like this, like all other countries. I think the police are perfecting their method of dealing with these people. I think that's why in the recent past, you don't have people who come and rob and disappear. Generally, the police are on them, are able to arrest them, and therefore that's how you could control crime. Because you can't say nothing can happen. Because when the criminals are sitting and planning in the quiet, you don't know. You only see them when they move the action. I think the question is how the security responds to that, how quick they do, how they try to save life. I think we have been successful in the recent past that all that have been done in terms of going to the malls, they have been apprehended generally. We haven't had a situation that there's a mall was attacked and we don't know where these people went to. I think that's what I think as a country we need to know, that we've got police that can deal with the matter if anything happens.
All right, okay, let's go straight to the floor. Table 35, we'll find Tokom Kwanaz. Table 35, Tokom Kwanaz.
Thank you, Peter. To the President from the Commission for Culture, Religion and Language, would like to find out what the President's office would like to do to work together with a Chapter 9 institution that is designed to look at issues of peace, tolerance, and making sure that there's nation building in the country. Looking at what has happened in Malamulele, Soweto, and what happened last night in Parliament. How do you think, President, we can use our religions and our various cultures to bring back the issue of respect for people, to bring back the issue of respect for our environment and where we live, and to go back to who we were? How do you see your office working together with the Civil Rights Commission on these particular issues?
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Table 37, Nox Msebenzi. Table 37, Nox Msebenzi.
Thank you very much, Peter. Mr. President, I'm speaking on behalf of the Nuclear Industry Association of South Africa. We were impressed, as we have been impressed in the past few years, with the government's commitment to the nuclear new build. We have taken cognizance of the fact that we have had responsibility to grow skills and to get that project on hand. But the realization is that we will need government support. We can't do it alone. We need government support. How do you see going forward the relationship between government and the industry in terms of realizing this goal?
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And then Anthony George in this round, table 23. Anthony George. Table 23, we'll find Anthony George. If you could just raise your hand so they can find you. Thank you. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm over here, I'm in a wheelchair, so I can't stand up, sorry. Mr. President, my question is regarding disability. Last year in your State of the Nation address, you moved disability from the presidency back to social development, and it's taking us back ages, and the perception is that disabled people are only good enough for disability grants. So I want to find out why was that, and will we be moved back to the presidency? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. All right, so let's start with the first one, social cohesion. We've seen the unrest in places like Malamulele, and there seems to be this feeling that if people aren't violent, they're not going to be heard. Your thoughts, Mr. President? How do we heal? How do we get people to be peaceful?
Well, no, thank you very much, Peter. I think that's a challenge that is facing all of us in the country. And I know that from time to time people think government must deal with these things only. I think it's a challenge, it's a national challenge. I had an opportunity about a week or so ago, or 2 weeks, to meet the religious group that we are establishing to work together. We talked about this matter a great deal. And it's a matter we're saying, the religious grouping in particular, they've got a role to play. It's important that we all discuss what role can we play at different sectors, tackling the same issue in the country. The point we're making was, we had, unlike many other countries, a system in South Africa which was very racist and became very violent. If you talked, if you do anything, they deal with you. That, in a sense, provoked the counter-violence. And therefore, the people over a long period had an understanding that if you had a problem with the authority, destroy, ban, and everything. And I was saying to them, we have not sat down as South Africans. We have had all the indabas, big indabas. We haven't discussed the psychological makeup of the population since that time. To say, how do we handle ourselves? How do we turn around the mindset that you can see either in protests, whatever, that people still believe this is an enemy, authority is an enemy. To say there's no longer any enemy now, this is your own authority. Handle it differently. We have not done so. We have not said we are now free, this is now our thing, our country. We need to help develop it so that it should be self-sufficient for everybody. It's a matter that we need to deal with, all of us. And we have agreed with the religious leaders that we should meet. There's a small group that is actually working the proposals on the things that we need to deal with just on this matter. There are some people who were so traumatized, but they've not gone even to some treatment, psychiatric treatment, whatever. Those may be very few individuals. But that's a challenge that faces the country. Now, if for an example, we have the media, we have every other thing that you communicate with the people, what is it that you are emphasizing to the people? But also at times, the manner in which we interact on these matters or report could be perpetuating that kind of trauma rather than helping. If, for an example, there is an accident or somebody kills somebody, you then expose that, a mutilated body, to children, to everybody. Now, you are actually influencing a society in a particular direction. You have got to protect the citizens from such a thing, so that the manner in which you report is effective, but it does not expose people to a person with half head, etc. Because it remains in the mind for a long time. So you perpetuate that. I always, when I talk to your colleagues, quote one example that in the United States, planes attacked tall buildings and got in there. Many people died, but not a single one can say saw a cop. But they reported effectively because they protect society. They make the society not to be traumatized. The manner in which we exaggerate, we traumatize, we are too negative in what we do things, that perpetuates that kind of psychological thing. It needs all of us to really to come together and say, let us preach from one script. So we have started with the religious group. We'll come to all groupings to deal with.
I'm going to try and rush us a little bit going forward because I'm mindful of time. But the nuclear industry, that's kind of, I guess, on the horizon. There's a lot of things that are going to be happening there. And the idea is, how do we increase local content? How is government going to be working with local industry going forward? I know that you have Minister here as well, so I don't know if you want to help you answer this, or what are your thoughts?
Well, nuclear is quite an important sector with regard to energy, and I think it's going to provide us a lot of energy. But it has a particular history in this country, which people at times don't realize. This country had developed the capacity to the highest level during apartheid days. But of course, there was a situation that it was developed to arm South Africa to be a powerful country militarily. So it was used for wrong reasons. Now, we came as those who said, let us have freedom and democracy, and said, we can't continue using it for military purposes. We need to use it for development, to address some of the challenges. And that's what we have done, and we are doing it. We have things that we have developed that out of nuclear that are helping the world, not just South Africans only. But the issue of the energy, we are getting there precisely because of its history. We have taken time to move step by step because it also has politics in it. It's business as well, but it's also politics. As you know, those countries that have the nuclear, they are most powerful. We know what, for an example, the world, the globe has done to a country in the Middle East that was developing this. I mean, the country was almost isolated, Iran. So we've got to know how to handle it, but not forget the politics as well. You know, for an example, the reason why South Africa destroyed the capability, because the friends of the apartheid South Africa said, don't give these guys, they called us communists. Don't give them this capacity, it's dangerous, right? Now, we are saying, we are not going to abuse it. We are going to deal with it, and it's part of the solution of the energy mix. But we are talking to countries who handle it because it's a sensitive thing. We have gone to all the countries that handle nuclear to look what is it that they can offer, because we know exactly what we need. So I've gone to all of them. So we now have the data, the information, what we need, which country to go to. Other countries make offers which are limited, others, they make the offers that you would have to accept. For an example, some countries are keen to work with us, but they are not keen to train our scientists, or they don't want us to be self-sufficient in terms of the knowledge. There are countries that are ready to train our scientists in mass, make us to be able to maintain our own kind of stations. Now, that is what we are looking at. We also moved to other countries. They call them to do the vendors. I don't know what, it's not like necessarily the people, it's the system. To come and explain and say, this is what we can offer. A number of countries were brought here, and the scientists and people who understand this sat down to listen. What can you offer us? And we have gone through that process. In the process, we are able to identify the countries. We have signed some agreements that are necessary with France, with China, with Russia. There are other countries on the pipeline that we could. And these are different levels and different aspects of what we can do with them. We had to do this. It is in actual fact required in terms of the aspect we are dealing with, that you must take a decision that is well informed. We are now well informed. We are moving ahead, and we are going to be beginning to move. Once we begin to move with these different agreements, that's when the business opportunities are going to come, and they're going to be very big. Everyone will have an opportunity. I know that people are in a hurry, they think they're being left out, blah, blah, blah. Others are trying to move slowly because they don't know what's going to happen. No, there's going to be sufficient business as we deal with it. So there is no worry. Business people must be ready to participate, but we would want this country to develop up to the maximum, to train its own citizens so that we can maintain our things. We don't depend on other people. So it is coming. Don't worry. We had to take our steps very carefully, understanding the politics, the business, also the interests of the country.
All right, okay. All right, so there was a third question from Anthony George, but we have to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll address, Ayanda will be talking to the First Lady, and then we'll also address Anthony's question, so we haven't forgotten you. Stay with us.
The mother city, as we continue to go through the State of the Nation address with a fine-tooth comb. Now, we've heard from Obaba, as he's more affectionately known, but now let's hear from Umama, First Lady Thobeka Madiba Zuma, to talk to us about what she thinks is happening in the country and the state of the nation. How are we looking, in your opinion?
I think, my dear, yesterday's State of the Nation address did set the tone of where our country is going, but also the President did reflect on where our country has been, how it's done and performed. And I think for me, it was a balanced speech. I know that there were those who said that they were bored. I think they were probably sleeping half of the speech, because I wasn't. The speech talked to critical issues, and one of which is a year rededicated to really dealing with racism, because we still are seeing the ugly heads of racism every now and then cropping up, like the incident we saw when the black boy child was raped with a broom. And I think for me, in our country, we've come a long way to still seeing those ugly heads of racism every now and then cropping up. And I think our president also talked about the economic climate of our country. You know, that by 2019, we should have achieved 5% growth. And I think if we don't experience any economic meltdown, we will definitely get there as a country. And I think also our president talked about employment versus job creation, and the emphasis is also on entrepreneurship, because I believe, you know, that he's demonstrated how he wants to drive small businesses, grow them in our country by creating a portfolio which is headed by our sister Lindiwe in ensuring that we grow our entrepreneurs, because I think for me, entrepreneurship, is an answer to job creation and ensuring that our country, creates jobs and employment. I think also our president talked about the land reform, which will really will have to be fast-tracked to see our people getting their land back in our country. And I think also another point which was very important in our country was looking forward to hear what the president was to say or talk about was energy. And for me, he said what I was thinking exactly in the car, that it's not crisis, it's a challenge. And he really, outlined how his cabinet and his ministry is going to respond to the challenge posed by, energy.
I'm beginning to wonder whether or not you wrote the speech or if the president wrote that speech, because you know it far too well. I am really beginning to wonder. Thank you so much for that.
The last point, my dear, I want to make is agriculture as well. The injection of 2 billion in agriculture. I think for me, any country that is strong on agriculture will really be able to drive poverty away. And if we strengthen our agriculture, and he talked about apples, as he said, that we're going to be exporting apples. I was actually amazed that, when you go abroad, you hear that people buy mangoes for $100. And I was like, in our country, we've got plenty of those, and we could be rich if only our country can ensure that exporting, our commodities is enhanced and we are able to trade with other countries. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you for that. Arguably the most important voice, because you know what they say, if mommy is not happy at home, no one is happy. So I think, Mr. President, she's very, very happy with that. But something else that I know the First Lady for, she is a health fanatic with a stringent fitness regime. President Jacob Zuma also mentioned that South Africans must start looking after themselves. Towards the end of the speech, he spoke about this, limiting the consumption of alcohol and also cutting out tobacco. Peter, it's over to you.
Thank you so much indeed. All right, there was a question just before the break, and I think we need to go to that one. Anthony George was concerned, and people with disabilities. He says, why was disability moved from the presidency to social development? He says that this creates the impression that disabled people are just good for disability grants. Is there a plan to train government officials to deal with issues of disability?
Well, thank you very much, Peter. Again, this issue did come, and I think our citizens have been raising that issue. This was informed in the main by the fact that if you are to handle any sector in whatever way, you need to have the resources for it in order to deal with that matter. Now, the presidency, as a presidency, do not necessarily have a kind of resources and the capacity to deal with those kind of issues. But the social development is actually meant to deal with those issues, and it has the budget for it. So that is simply what informed in the main the shift. Because you'd come to the president and raise issues, the presidency will have to defer that to a department. Now, if the president had to deal with that in every respect, then it will mean its job of supervising government really is undermined, because you have got to take a lot of effort to work as a department. Now, logically, as we were rationalizing how the government must be structured, clearly here is a department that has the capacity, has the budget, has everything to address the issues. What we thought to be important is that the people with disabilities will still come and raise.
All right. Okay, I'm going to push us because we're running out of time, and I do want to get to as many questions as possible. Let's start with, is that Khadebe Sibusiso, table number 6. If you can be very brief with your question, and I will get a very brief answer for you. Sibusiso Khadebe, table number 6. Okay. All right, you can give him a quick answer as well. Comprehensive,
Okay,
quick.
I realize that.
Hashtag President Zuma. President, my question is in relation to the increase of unemployment for the youth, and in terms of making sure that there's sustainability in their small businesses that they are establishing, because there is no proper capacity that is invested in towards them being sustainable in their businesses. I'm trying to check what is the plan of the president in ensuring that young people, their small businesses are being supported, and also they also can get funding in ensuring that they can be able to be sustainable. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. Firstly, I think even yesterday we said quite a lot on the youth, what we are doing, what is being done, what is the response. Even the partnership that we have made with the private sector, we even gave figures of how much of the youth has been absorbed as a result of the programs that we have introduced, and how much we are still prepared to go forward. But in addition to that, if you talk about small businesses, we have established a ministry specifically to deal with small businesses, and it is looking at the youth. The youth, because of its numbers, that's one of the areas the small business has to look at. And I think we have, in my view, just about almost enough kind of programs to address the youth thing. Besides the fact that they handle their own budget on a specific issue, YDA for an example. But you still have these others. And I think you must go to the new ministry and be more of a menacing kind of sector, more than anybody else, because you are beginning to do businesses. I think you will realize that there will be possibilities of funds as well as in other areas. I would be very happy at some point if the youth said, whilst you have all these kind of structures, we still have a problem, or this one is not responding to our request, so that we could deal with those matters very specifically. I think we have more this time around to go to as a youth than any other time before.
Okay, Minister, there's a tweet that keeps doing the rounds at the moment, and I'm just wondering, because you mentioned the media a short while ago at the beginning, the role that we're playing. Do you feel threatened by the media? Is the media doing its job? Yusuf Abramji is saying that he feels threatened by one of your ministers. He says, you got a tweet saying you're pushing us too much and you're hardening us day by day. We're at the edge right now. If you want to know us, carry on. Your thoughts on that?
No, I don't feel threatened by the media. Not at all. I think the media reports. It is its job to do so, and it must report on every other thing. I have no problem. I think our media is more thorough in reporting than in many other places. In other places, they've got very clear views. No media reports negatively about their country because they're not selling the country better, etc. It's not just a speculation. I had a discussion with a colleague of mine at one point in some country where I discovered the crime was just beyond anything. And I hadn't read about this. When I asked why, he says, no, our media can't sell our country negatively. They've got to sell it positive. That's a different belief. I think in South Africa, we want everything. I think we're a very open society in South Africa. I have no problem, and I don't think the media is threatening. I've got only one complaint. The media, in terms of reporting, is not balanced. That's my problem. If they report about a negative thing, they put wild headlines. At times, the headlines don't even talk to the content properly. And then you deal with that. But when, for an example, the matter is corrected, they don't do it in the same way. You find somewhere in the middle of the paper a small little thing. I think that's unfair. It's not balanced. I think it's not balanced, and that has been my complaint, and all the media houses know about my complaint. Because if we had said you have reported something this way, and when you now correct it, give it the same prominence to clear what was in your paper. You know, I once discussed with a newspaper editor who's no longer alive now, and I won't mention the name, because there was a report about, it was during the negotiations. I said, but when you're correcting this thing, why didn't you? And he was in trouble. That's one thing. The second thing is, how far do you go in reporting about, for an example, personal things about individuals? You have a person with a family, with relatives, with everything. How do you handle that in terms of reporting about that person? I think there could be a better way of dealing with it, rather than the manner in which that. Deal with the facts, but not in the manner that you feel you are almost singling out this individual. So it is the manner in which the media at times takes the matters that I have a problem with. But insofar as reporting about the facts, wonderful. Okay. It's important to make this point. I had an opportunity to meet the editors and analysts last Sunday. And they asked me about Nkandla. And I was saying to them, you know, when there was an allegation that Zuma squandered 250 million rand building his house, there were headlines all over the world. There were 3 institutions that have investigated this. They found that Zuma did not take even a penny. There are no headlines to say Zuma, in fact, did not squander the money. That's my problem. That's my problem. I have a problem with that type of report. As I said, it's not balanced. Now, some people far away who are not in South Africa still believe that that president is very corrupt. Even here in South Africa, people say corruption, Kandla. There's no corruption in Kandla. But it's still reported even by your media, by everybody. That's a balancing. If you had reported about something, I think it's important to correct the information as well. Reporting must be balanced. I'm sorry I've taken your time. This point is very important.
All right, okay. And I think that we've been balanced and given you your full chance to answer that question. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. You can never have enough time to discuss issues of the whole country, but I'm sure that we'll have another opportunity with the President in the near future. But so, from us, thank you very much indeed for joining us. And I know that Anda wants to say goodbye, but have a great day, everybody, and a great weekend. Anda?
Thank you so much, Peter. You're quite right. There's so much to talk about, so little time. My thanks also to the ministers who've availed themselves to have a conversation with us as we continue to take a look at the state of the nation. It's goodbye, God bless from the Mother City. We'll see you again soon. It's over to you in studio, Leanne.